Hello, I'm JForceG, and welcome to the second episode of my UPBGE 0.3, I think, tutorial series. Today we'll be doing a little intro on variables/properties, and also we'll be adjusting our character controller that we made last episode. The first thing we're going to do here is change the name, because it's very important to keep things organized. We're going to change the name of our cube to player. Alright. The second thing we're going to do is change our physics type in the physics tab. Make sure it's selected here to dynamic. Now, the reason why we're switching to dynamic is because it's more versatile. For an example, it uses the laws of gravity that you can set in the scene properties, for an example. So the gravity is here, we can make it higher or lower. Another reason why is because it's less jittery. In the last episode, we found that moving towards, like, colliding with objects would lead to this weird jittery issue when you were using character physics properties, or physics types. And one way to deal with that is changing the physics type. There are some drawbacks, however, and one of the drawbacks is that it's a little bit more intensive for the engine to deal with. But ultimately it is better if you program it in a smart way. Now we're going to find when we, press play that we can't jump anymore, and our crouching is a little off. We're going to have to make some adjustments. Firstly, we are going to go down here, and the reason why our crouching is off is because we're using walk, and walk is something that's more associated with the character controller. So instead of walk, we are gonna shift A to add a apply impulse. There we go. Okay, we're gonna choose our player character. We're gonna make it local. And we're just gonna add maybe 1 to it. And let's see if that works here. Not quite. You can see the difference in physics. It's a little bit more bouncy. Yeah. Well, it's kind of working, yeah, but a little bit more, I think, will do it. So, there we go. Now there's going to be less jitter, and yeah. Jumping is a little bit tricky. This is another one that's more associated with the character physics type, which we aren't going to use for the reasons specified before. We are going to delete this mofo, and we are going to add a ray. Okay. What a ray does is it shoots out an invisible kind of like line that checks to see if a certain object is colliding with this line. A ray, if you will. And what we're going to use this ray for is to check if the player here is touching the ground. So let's make it so every time we press space is when this applies. And we're going to test it right now. We're going to press P here. Of course, we can't see anything, and that is because we got to press visualize. We still can't see anything, and that's because the origin isn't set to the player. So we are going to move this aside a bit, the ray, Shift A, and add get position. So we're getting the position of the player object. Alright, and then we're going to put that into the origin. Alright. Yep, there we go. We could see it. It's a little small, like short period of time. Just for the purposes, just in case you can't see it, I'm going to add a update. We're going to delete this after, but what this does is it makes it work every frame. Now, you want to use this as little as possible, just because it checks for something for every frame, which is a lot for the engine to do. Alright, so but we can see it here. Now why is it only following the origin? Well, that's because we got to make it local. There we go. Where is it here? Okay. The reason why we can't see it is because we got to bring down the z-axis, and that should show it. Yeah, we can see it now. Okay. We can also use array for enemy AI, for an example. We could shoot out an array going in their general direction where their face would be. And if the player touches the ray, then the enemy sees the player. And, you know, we'll go into that too in the future. So now that we have our array set up, we are going to first off get rid of this, because I only put it there just to show you. We are going to plug this into here, and we are going to look for the property floor. Okay. It's not going to work, and the reason for that is because we got to click on our floor and add the property to it, which is called floor. Right? So one thing to keep in mind is every time you select an object, it shows you, it changes the properties. It doesn't change it, it shows you the properties that it has. So see, floor, the logic tree, which is what we're using here for the player, and the floor for the floor. Okay, so what we're going to click on our player again. Okay, when the ray, when space is pressed and the ray touches the property floor, we are going to apply impulse. And we're going to add the object, we're going to choose the object player. And let's see here, we're going to, the direction, first off we're going to make it local, and the direction is going to be up on the z-axis. So let's see how well this works. Oh, well it works, but we got to add more. So 10 maybe? Haha! Now, we got it. We got it. So now it'll only, our boy here will only jump when the character controller is on the floor. Okay. Now it is a little bit floaty. So in our scene tab, we are gonna add, we're gonna make it 15 instead. And there we go. That's a little bit better for sure. Maybe 18. Aha. Yeah. Less floaty. Yeah. So let's test it out here. See how well we fit through here. Yeah. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind is to make sure all your objects, go into your physics tab there for your objects, Make sure all the collision bounds are enabled for every object in your scene, especially your player. Yeah, so that is this part of the episode. Next, we're gonna look into variables. Alright, so what is a variable? To put it in a simple way, a variable, in this case a property, is a value, or rather a storage data. It stores a value, and you could ascribe things that happen based on that value. So a Boolean is sort of like an on or off switch. We can make it so a light is turned on if it is, checked, and we can make it so it's turned off if it is not checked. We have an integer, which is a number, and we have a float, which is a number with decimals, and a string, which is sort of like words and stuff, letters. So we can make a string anything, really, anything. And for an example, you could probably make a password system with a string. Timer, this is an uncommon one. I haven't used it yet, but I assume it works, it checks to see how much time has passed. Yeah, I haven't seen it in any other engines. I've seen variants, but it wasn't sort of like a type of data, So as an example, we are going to make a sprint function by, I'm going to move this up here, by making this speed value, sort of tethering it to our, first off, I'm going to change the data type to float, because that is the type that is here. Yeah, we're going to change it to speed, or rather, player speed. Okay? And yeah. Another thing we're going to do is add a Boolean. So to do that, we add game property, change to Boolean. In some other engines, it might just be known as bool. We're going to change it to, we're going to call it is sprinting. The reason why I'm using, let me fix that too, this naming convention, the capital, is because I like things to be consistent in case I have to refer to it a second time or another time without any drop-down menus. Okay, so we are going to evaluate. We're going to go Shift A, evaluate property of player, and or we could even just press this button, use owner, which kind of just refers to the object it's using. We're gonna is sprinting. We're gonna change it to bool, as I mentioned before, which is Boolean. And so is this value true, as in checked? If this is true, then we are going to change the player speed. Oh, sorry. Set property. That's what we're looking for. We're going to set the property of the player to the player speed, and we're going to change it to float, and we're going to set it to 0.2, sorry. And we're going to add a, well, first we're going to move this over here. Control A, not. So what this checks for is if this is not true, if it's the opposite, then something else happens. So in this case, we're going to change we're gonna make sure this is selected. Hold Shift D. And if it's not true, we're gonna go 0.1. Okay. And instead of this being here, we're gonna keep this here, but we're gonna add get property. And I'm gonna choose player, player speed, and the property value we're gonna put to speed. All right. Now we're going to notice. Press 0 on our numpad and press play. There isn't a difference in our speed, and that is because we got to make a button to toggle this on and off. But first, just to show you that it works, I'm gonna make is sprinting true. And there we go. Look how fast we're going. Ooh, we're going so fast. Alright, so now it's time to add the key that needs to be down. So we're going to Shift A, we're going to key down is what we're looking for. So if the key Shift is down, we're going to Shift A, set property of the player to is sprinting. We're going to change it to bool true. Now we're going to do the same thing but the inverse by adding key up. Key up. We're going to copy and paste this, but uncheck it this time. Okay, let's test it out. Yeah, there we go. We hold Shift. We're going faster. So that is your intro into properties. They're kind of like, ultimately they are a value that you then use to manipulate and make rules, sort of. Look at my happy cube boy. Yeah, so that was this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you make beautiful stuff. Please check me out on Twitter at jforceg_dev. Check me out on itch.io at the jforceg_dev, I believe, or I could be just jforceg. I also make music if you need something done. Oh, another thing we should probably do really quickly is turn visualize off with array, because we don't need it right now. There we go. Alright, so yeah, hope you enjoyed. Have a good day, night, or whatever.